Please join us for this 6 News special report as we celebrate Hispanic heritage in mid-Michigan.
Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Jorma Duran.
And I'm Araceli Crescencio. For the next half hour, we're going to share our stories with you. They're stories about the Hispanic and Latino people here in mid-Michigan and about the difference they make in our lives and our culture. And speaking of culture, we're going to kick things off with a song. It's by a music professor at Michigan State University who was nominated for 2 Latin Grammys, proving the Latin music culture is alive and well in the middle of Michigan.
What you're hearing is Latin Grammy-nominated music, recorded and performed on the campus of Michigan State University. The album is called King Mango Berry, and it combines 2 styles of music not normally thought to go together, classical and Latin. But yet, this complex set of sounds is exactly what Professor Ricardo Lorenz was hoping to create while honoring his Hispanic heritage.
I lived 21 years in Venezuela. And it's in my blood.
King Mango Berry, written by Lorenz, performed by students in the MSU Wind Symphony, featuring Venezuelan maracas player Manuel Rangel, was nominated for 2 2020 Latin Grammys for Best Classical Album and Best Classical Contemporary for its track Pararuco. The idea started roughly 20 years ago, based off an encounter Lorenz had in Venezuela when a fellow musician from New York ordered a combination of mango and strawberry at a common fruit stand, a mixture that perplexed him and the vendor, yet tasted so good.
And that got me thinking, that we sometimes don't appreciate what we have, and it takes somebody from another culture to show us different ways of thinking of things.
So Lorenz began writing a story based off of characters he created from different blends of food, like coconut and walnut, asparagus and cherry, and of course, King Mango Berry, then composed music to support his fairy tale. The conductor of the Grammy-nominated recording, Kevin Seditol, says it's this type of music that brings people from different places together in harmony.
It's wonderful to experience that. It's wonderful to work with people from different cultures. That's what makes us great. That's what makes this country great, is that we are a mix of all of this stuff.
A special brand of classical music, Lorenz says, took a long time to make, but became well worth it in the end, especially when his work can raise the level of musical influence coming from the Hispanic community.
I see value in sharing that knowledge that a lot of people don't have in my community, and I think it enriches it. There's a great trade-off. I learn and my community learns, so I think it's not only that I can't help it, but I think it's a duty that we have.
King Mango Berry didn't get the top prize, but it is the first time MSU has ever been recognized by the Latin Grammys.
In the Mexican culture, there's a sound in mariachi music that can signify immense joy or sadness, a sound that fills ballrooms of quinceañeras and backyard family gatherings. Sarah Alshay is here for you now with the sound that unifies a nation.
It's a point of love for yourself, for your community, and for your culture.
An explanation and an expression of life.
Like it's something that just comes out from within.
It's a sound many Mexicans are familiar with.
At dances, at quinceañeras, at the barbecues.
It can be at the football game, at the baseball game, at any sports event, at a big event.
The grito is a sound most commonly heard in mariachi music. It's an emotional expression by the singer.
It could be almost like a cry if it's an emotional song, and then it could be happy when it's a really, happy, good-going song.
Grito is the Spanish word for yell, shout, or cry, but in the Mexican culture, it means much more.
An expression of joy, of relief, of tension release.
Diego Rivera is a jazz studies professor at Michigan State University. He says the grito is unique because it's not only for musicians.
The audience members also can participate, and I think that brings it closer together.
Someone who's experienced that firsthand is Norma Patricia Serna. She is a mariachi singer in Lansing.
It feels great. It feels like the music's really touching them.
Gritos aren't just emotional, their origins are actually political, and they date all the way back to the 1800s in Hidalgo, Mexico. On September 16, 1810, Catholic priest Miguel Hidalgo rang his church bell and gave the call to arms, starting the Mexican War of Independence. Historians call that the original grito, and every year it's reenacted in Mexico.
The president comes out and announces all of the heroes of the revolution.
¡Viva Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla! ¡Viva México!
That is the grito de la independencia.
Lorenzo Lopez is a historian in Lansing. He says today there are two types of gritos: the emotional grito in songs and el grito ceremony on Mexico's Independence Day.
It's an expression of our identity and is an expression of our unity.
So whether it's on September 15th for Mexico's Independence Day or during a mariachi song,
Decirle que usted es mi vida.
the grito is a central part of the Mexican culture. But regardless of where you're from, the grito is for everyone.
It doesn't matter what language you speak. Put out the grito, reduce your stress, smile, and just continue on.
Here for you in Lansing, Sarah Alsheh, 6 News.
Wow, all right. Can you do that?
Maybe after the show. And coming up next, we'll introduce you to a Michigan grad man who once barely spoke the language, who has a story that's literally out of this world. Welcome back. Our next story focuses on a local business who believes in the values of Hispanic culture and is passing them down from generation to generation.
The Lopez family of Lansing embodies that tradition, especially when it comes to giving back. Sherry Jones spent some time with Guillermo Lopez and his daughter Trinidad.
I always knew that our household was a little different. I couldn't understand why we weren't allowed to eat grapes in our household, and as I grew older, I learned about the grape boycott in California, workers' rights, paying a fair wage.
Treating others fairly and respectfully is paramount in the Lopez family household. It was taught to Guillermo Lopez at a young age, and now he's passing it on to the next generation.
My mom came to the United States when I was 4 years old. So we came and lived in South Texas, obviously undocumented. For many years, and my mom worked, but she always said, you respect people, Education at the time was not how many degrees you had or you graduated from high school. It was how you treated your company when they came to the house.
Guillermo's eldest daughter, Trinidad, says these lessons have made her the woman she is today.
I could not be more grateful for my dad and my grandparents, my mother, everyone who came before me and did their part, and whether it was seeking out a new country for a better life for your children, or working hard once you were here.
Like her father, Trinidad witnessed early in her childhood how important it is to treat people equally. Guillermo has spent most of his professional life as a civil servant. He recently retired as an equal opportunity specialist for the city of Lansing and has spent more than 20 years on the Lansing School Board. Guillermo has also volunteered at the Cristo Rey Community Center for decades. His daughter says helping people is in his blood, and now in hers.
I can recall times on a Saturday morning we would receive a phone call and they said, we have a new family in town who is looking for help and resources. So either there he goes or there we go together, and we maybe pick up a meal, or he's spending the next half hour making phone calls, looking for ways to help this person that he's never met, that was new to our community.
Guillermo knows firsthand about families who come to the U.S. in search of the American dream, similar in their goals, but often differing in their needs.
You have to understand the community. Hispanics are not monolithic. We're very diverse. So you have the migrant community and the refugee community they're both Hispanic, but they're completely different backgrounds, completely different needs.
For Guillermo and Trinidad, serving the community is part of the Lopez family legacy. In Lansing, Sherry Jones, 6 News.
Now, while she hasn't held an elected office, Trinidad was once a top assistant to Attorney General Dana Nessel and currently serves on the board of the Cristo Rey Community Center.
The subject of our next story started with almost nothing, but through perseverance and some help from the University of Michigan, he ended up making his mark on Mars. It's a story that's truly out of this world.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars.
History for NASA and for Elio Morillo.
I was born in Ecuador in the 90s. The 90s were pretty turbulent for the country for many reasons, politically and economically.
Just like the rover, Morillo persevered, overcoming obstacle after obstacle. His family arrived in New York with little money and little knowledge of English. His mother had to start from zero.
My mama didn't know the language, so she couldn't get back into teaching and had to pick up jobs to make ends meet, basically.
He knew he had only one way of escaping poverty.
It was always just very important and very clear that education was going to be the way out of poverty and into the middle class.
So in class, he worked hard, and by high school, it became clear that he wanted to work in space. He was accepted to New York's New Explorations into Science, Technology, and Math High School with hopes of becoming an engineer. But just getting there was a challenge.
It was going to be an hour commute each way, a little more than an hour because I had to take a bus and the subway.
After high school, Morillo was sure he'd be attending college somewhere.
The school that flew me out, that I was dead set on going to, was Carnegie Mellon.
Morillo had already been accepted to the University of Michigan, but he wasn't able to visit the school, so he never really considered it. At the last minute, Midwest hospitality won him over. Daryl Cook, the director of MSTEM Academies at U of M, called him up and offered to show him around.
Daryl Cook personally took care of me that upcoming weekend, picked me up from the airport, showed me Ann Arbor, walked me through campus.
He's come a long way since then, becoming an integral member in the mission to the Red Planet.
So in a gist, over the years, I helped integrate and test the Earth version of the rovers, making sure that all those capabilities and all those functions that were into the software worked well before we sent those commands to space and to Mars.
He says reaching for the stars was made possible because of the community behind him.
Yeah, it is very difficult. I'm not going to paint it in a pretty picture because it's not. It's grueling. It requires discipline. But I think what helped me be so successful was always finding a supportive community. I will never tell you that I got here on my own.
Now he's on another mission.
I want kids to look at someone and realize that they sound like them, that I look like them, that I have the immigrant background as many as them do, and that they can be here too, and that I want them to be here with me.
Morillo says he'll continue to work to increase Latino representation at NASA and plans to attend career fairs across the country.
Wow, thanks, Araceli. Coming up, we'll show you how one farm worker made a difference in the lives of many Michiganders and how some Spartans are following in his footsteps. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. The Black Civil Rights Movement had Martin Luther King help pave the path to freedom.
And for many Hispanics and Latinos, farm worker Cesar Chavez was the leader of their movement.
And his visit to MSU in the 1970s changed lives in more ways than once. Joss Sanchez shows us how.
My very first memory of that is having to leave our dog in San Antonio, Texas.
Michigan State University Librarian Emeritus Diana Rivera remembers picking sugar beets and other vegetables in 1960s Bay County. From the age of 8 to 18, she picked or sewed along with other migrant farm workers.
I remember feeling so sad, that I had to hoe and hoe and hoe and hoe from one road to the end of to another road.
Rivera worked on mile-long stretches of farmland, but through persistence and help from Chicano students, she found her way to MSU. It was here where she would cross paths with Cesar Chavez during a visit to the school in 1973.
And Chavez just walked up to the front, and very quietly, he was just so humble and quiet, soft-spoken. And I thought, I don't know how this guy's going to do it.
She remembers that it wasn't the volume of his speech, but it was the power of his words that inspired the crowd to press for fair wages and better conditions. Thingsdale, Florida's Freeman, Director of Migrant Affairs for the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, seen change.
So, outhouses were very prevalent, very like centralized shower facilities. Some of that housing still exists, but a lot of that has been replaced by newer housing.
Freeman says he would not be where he's at today without the self-advocacy that Chavez inspired.
A lot of what we have and are able to offer people in this state was the result of the work of the people that came before me. The farm workers who advocated for themselves, those who advocated for farm workers.
Andrea Salazar McMillan, MSU's Chicano and Latino Studies librarian, says that the message of self-advocacy echoed within the Hispanic community, further bolstering a sense of pride.
I think that's really helped to structure kind of like this identity of coming together for a cause and of working to help each other, to essentially lift each other up.
That pride can be found at the many Hispanic heritage festivals that take place around the state each year. And there's more to that culture that can be found within the Cesar Chavez collection within MSU's main library. Here for you in East Lansing, Josh Sanchez, 6 News.
The Cesar Chavez visit also helped plant the seeds for a program at MSU devoted to helping young migrant and seasonal farm workers. It's called CAMP, and for the past 20 years, it has made a difference for many Hispanic students and their families as well.
You're looking at the newest group of Spartans associated with MSU's College Assistance Migrant Program, or CAMP. Students that before ever stepping on campus were seasonal farm workers, with most never even thinking about getting a higher education.
For the most part, they're all first generation. So that means that there's not a family history that can guide them.
Which is exactly what MSU Migrant Services Director Luis Alonso Garcia and his staff do. Guide young men and women into a new world and away from working in the fields.
We remove obstacles and help educate people in terms of what are the processes and procedures for you to negotiate your academic experience.
Unforeseen hurdles like housing, social and financial support, even how to fill out applications. Also, CAMP students can complete their first year of college. Exactly what happened to current CAMP Senior Associate Director Elias Lopez.
I'm the first one in my family to go to college, and I knew nothing about it.
Lopez says while working in the fields in Michigan nearly 20 years ago, he met a camp recruiter, maybe through fate, who helped set his life on a new path.
The recruiter for this program came looking for someone else, and I happened to open the door. And it changed my life forever.
For more than 2 decades, MSU's camp has offered individuals with migrant or seasonal farm work backgrounds an opportunity to begin an undergraduate program at MSU. A once-in-a-lifetime chance current camp student Guadalupe Martinez is very thankful for.
I've had to work for myself my entire life. When I was here and I really needed them, I came and they helped me. They were here when I needed emotional support, when I needed help paying for my school, when I needed help buying my books. And I'm sorry I'm getting a little emotional, but it's camp has really helped a lot.
So much so, Martinez is set to graduate soon, adding to the list of more than 1,000 former camp students who now hold a Michigan State University degree.
What we want to make sure that we set up is an experience where there's no excuse for a person not to be successful here.
And right now, more than 250 MSU camp scholars continue to pursue their academic goals.
When we come back, we've got a story that's close to our hearts.
¿Qué onda Michigan te provee las noticias que necesitas escuchar hoy?
We're going to show you how Spanish speakers in the greater Lansing area get their news.
We'll be right back. We're about to wrap up our Hispanic Heritage Month special, highlighting the impact of those in the Latinx community here in mid-Michigan.
And some of you may know that Araceli does a weekly wrap-up of the news in Spanish, which we put on WLNS.com.
But there's also a Lansing-based podcast that serves as one of the other Spanish news sources in the area.
And as it turns out, Araceli plays a big role in that production too. Tony Garcia is here for you now to tell you what's up with that.
¿Qué ¿Qué Onda Michigan te provee las noticias que necesitas escuchar hoy?
Today's 24-hour news cycle leaves no shortage of when or where to get information. TV stations, radio stations, newspapers, digital platforms, and podcasts. The list is seemingly endless, but that isn't the case for the Latinx community.
Spanish local news is something that people don't have a lot of access to. So national news, you have Univision and Telemundo, and people can tune in. But growing up, my parents only speak Spanish, so this is something that's near and dear to my heart, making sure that other people have access to kind of what's happening in their community and bridging the information gap. I think when people know more, they're able to do more.
Julie Soche is the Senior Director of Content and Communication for WKAR. She says putting an emphasis on reaching the Latin community has been a goal for some time.
Specifically, in this last year, we have put a focus on strengthening relationships and creating collaborations with our local Latinx community. And our goal with this work was to make sure that we were providing local radio and television content and events and engagement opportunities that best reflects the issues and that are important to the Latinx community here.
So, ¿Qué Onda Michigan has set out to fill the void across the state. It's an NPR-affiliated podcast taped weekly on Fridays inside WKAR. Just like your local English news, it covers all the latest topics.
So 3 big headlines and kind of a conversation about what's going on to try and elaborate a little bit more and put it into perspective. So I think that's what you miss a lot of. Sometimes when you read an article, you kind of left with wanting to know a little bit more, and so that's what we provide.
Crescencia was approached by her co-host, Michelle Jokic Polo, back in December. Jokic Polo has been reporting in Michigan for more than 7 years, starting at El Vocero Hispano, the state's largest Hispanic newspaper. It didn't take long to realize she'd found her calling.
As a Latina woman, I was really passionate about reporting in my community and informing my community members of not just resources, but making sure that they have the news that they need, to go about their day.
Jokic Polo says while her job has been to inform the Hispanic community in the greater Lansing area, they've actually taught her as well.
What surprised me is to know how long the Latinx community has been in mid-Michigan. They've been here for decades and they have power, they're in positions of power. That's kind of really astounding and wonderful.
The two didn't know one another prior to this podcast, but Crescencio said it was a good match from the start.
It's been so great. I think when you get to collaborate with other journalists who have similar paths to you, just a little bit different, it's really great to be able to come together and do something that we both enjoy.
Here for you in Lansing, Tony Garcia, 6 News.
Well, thank you again, Araceli, for all you do to keep everyone here in Mid-Michigan informed.
Of course, and thanks to all of you for watching Hispanic Heritage in Mid-Michigan. Adios.